Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have Jillian Yetter from Delaware. She is a, how do you say it?
Audiobook narrator.
Narrator. Okay, thank you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us how you do this and how you got started?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Jillian Yetter. I have been an audiobook narrator for 4 years now. And I've done about 80 titles in that time. Some under my own name, some under a pseudonym for romance. I started off, I was in the classroom as a high school English teacher for 10 years. Is my passion. I love teaching. I love everything about it. It's what I thought I was going to do for my whole life because I love sharing literature with the world. It's what I love to do. But in 2018, I was diagnosed with a neurological condition that ended up being pretty chronic and kept me from the classroom, and I ended up having to leave on disability. So I felt really lost without the world of teaching because I'd been doing it since I was 21. It was most of my whole identity, who I was as a person. Once I left the classroom, I didn't know what to do. So one day I was just in an Ulta parking lot crying and on Google Jobs, and I Googled things to do with books that former English teachers can do. And I found audiobook narration.
I love it that you taught literature and now you're reading literature because, I mean, honestly, you're still teaching.
Yes, and it really does feel that way. Like I still get to share books with the world. Like it's a fantastic opportunity that I wouldn't get to have otherwise. And I kind of stumbled into it and I started walking and just slowly learning, finding out it's actually a pretty difficult profession once you actually get into the nitty-gritty of all of it. It took me 3 months to do my first book.
Hmm.
Now it takes me about a week to do a book. But I just slowly walked into it and started learning more and more and doing YouTube videos and taking courses. And now 4 years later, this is my full-time job with part-time hours.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit. How long
Okay.
did it feel like you needed to get up to speed? Like you said, it's not something you just walk into.
So there were fewer resources back then. So this is pre-pandemic, the influx of people working from home. So in 2020, things really started shifting to more work from home, more resources for people to become audiobook narrators. But in 2018, 2019, weren't as many resources. So I started on a website called acx.com. It's Audiobook Creation Exchange. It's through Audible and Amazon. And it's for people who publish through Amazon to put their books up independently as authors or rights holders and connect themselves independently with a narrator. So the contract is strictly between the rights holder, usually the author, and the narrator. There's no one in between. So I just got on there, put a few samples on, and someone hired me. And I said, yes, I can complete this job, having no idea what it meant to complete this job. So I had to watch a ton of YouTube videos because, first of all, I needed a setup, right? So I needed a soundproof room,
Mhm.
which at that time was a closet that I used. And I got like a USB microphone, and that was my starter setup. And then I needed to learn, actually recording it wasn't as time consuming or difficult, like the actual reading of the book, but then I was in charge of editing it
Oh, really?
entirely. So it goes completely from my house to Audible, and I had no idea how to make that happen.
Oh my goodness. So you needed to know all the technical.
Yes, I had to learn a completely new language of audio engineering. Now, fortunately for me, there's a ton of resources through ACX. I was using Audacity was the program I was using at the time.
Mhm.
So Audacity has a lot of information on there about podcasts and audiobook narration and how to edit that. So I was able to access that information, but it did take me 3 months to get like a 6-hour book completed. because I had to learn that. And now since then, I've upgraded my equipment, I've upgraded my knowledge, my systems I'm running. But in the beginning, I had no idea everything that goes into it. It takes about 6 hours to produce every 1 hour of audiobook that you hear.
Mm-hmm. I believe
Yeah.
you because I know with podcasting, you think it's just like a, turn it on and publish, but it's not that easy.
Yes, you have to go through everything and you have to edit it and master and proof. Well, for us, you have to proof, you have to make sure it's 100% accurate to the text,
Mm.
which was hard to do at first because one thing that I did as an English teacher is when you're reading to students, you're not focusing on every single word. You're just mainly focusing on content. So if
Mm-hmm.
you stumble over something, you just keep going.
Right.
You can't do that in narration. You have to stop, fix it, stop,
Mm.
fix it. So it was learning how to read out loud all over again.
I suppose it's easier to stop and fix it in real time rather than to finish the entire book and then have to go back
Yes, it's
and fix
easier
all of
to
them.
do it in real time. So I've now learned a skill called punch and roll, which is something where you take it back a few beats, listen to it, and then it starts recording after a few beats. So you talk along with it so you can get the same tone.
Okay.
So when I go back to listen, edit my final audio, it's already pretty pristine and exactly all the words that I want it to be. There's no errors in it.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
Are you still in a closet?
I am not in a closet. My husband built me a custom studio. So I have this wonderful, I think it's like a 4 foot by 5 foot, maybe 4 by 6 studio space where it's completely standalone and it's mostly soundproof except for planes and trains,
Okay.
which are very close.
Oh, really? I'm
Yes.
actually working out of a closet. I usually
Okay.
only am really in here for recording at this point. I used to
Okay.
teach full time out of here as well, but I
Wow.
do get a little claustrophobic when I'm just in here by myself. I'm talking to someone, it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
But I like it for the sound buffering
Yes. Yeah.
quality.
It's great for that.
I have 3 kids that are kind of bouncing around, like, downstairs. I'm like, "Hey, just be, offline for a little while and don't disturb me." And
Yeah.
they're of an age that I can do that. They know that they can come in for emergencies. But it
Same.
does help, like, keep out some of the squeals and whatever they're doing.
Yes.
Um, but just last night, actually, we were having this conversation. I was closing the wardrobe that we built. It's an IKEA wardrobe. We both each have like a double wardrobe in
Okay.
our bedroom because I've displaced us from this closet. And my husband's like, well, it would be nice to have the closet back again someday. And I'm like,
It's my
probably not going
closet.
to happen unless we move into a house that has an office for me because he's working out of our bedroom. So
Okay.
your studio sounds a lot like the kind of studio I might have practiced in when I was a music major.
Okay.
Is it kind of
Probably.
like a musician's, like you've got
I'd
the
say so.
foam all over and
Yes, all the foam, so much foam, um, lots of carpeting to now, like, it's mine's more for deadening sound
mhm,
coming in rather than deadening sound going out, if
mhm,
that makes sense,
mhm,
so it's the acoustics are different,
mhm.
but yeah, it's very similar to what you would use for a music studio.
And then you mentioned that you originally started with like a USB microphone. Did you end up upgrading the microphone too, or is that your
I
same setup?
did. Yes, I've upgraded twice. So I'm on my third microphone. It's very, very pretty. I just invested in this one a few months ago. Just paid it off as well. And so I want to say Newman, but I know it's not Newman. It's said with a different accent, but I'm going to say Newman
Spelled
TLM.
like
I'm sorry.
spelled like Newman?
Yes, it's spelled like Newman. Yes.
Okay. I wouldn't know.
But someone said the correct way to say it the other day, and I had no idea. But it's TLM 102, I believe.
Sounds good. So this would be something that like audio book narrators and say podcasters and musicians all would use, or is it really specific for audiobook for some reason?
I'd say I've been told that it's a pretty versatile mic. So it's really good for just audio in general. It just brings up good audio. I don't know if it'd be one for musicians, but as far as podcasters and voiceover work, it's a good mic. I'm not an expert on mics, but I've been told it's a good one.
And what made you want to upgrade again?
So there were a few issues with the sound on the one that I had. Um And so I started researching a little bit, seeing what other narrators were using. And it seemed like the mic that I was using, which was a Rode NT1A,
Mhm.
was more of a starter mic in narration. So I really started researching into forums about what other people were using. And when this year I was like, okay, I can do one big purchase. And my one big purchase was that I could upgrade my mic to get a better sound quality. And now I'm using an audio engineer to do my work. I'm not engineering my own work anymore.
Okay, yep.
And he said that the sound quality is much better. So
Okay,
it's a worthy investment.
right. So when did you make that switch?
Oh my goodness. I made that switch about a year and a half ago. So I guess I did my first 30 books on my own. And then someone told me that I could. I didn't know that I could. I had no idea that I could hire someone to do that part of my job. That was the hardest part of my job for me.
Mhm.
So in the spring of 2021 is when I made the switch and hired someone. And now I think I've edited 2 projects this year.
Okay. I mean, this year meaning it's January
Sorry,
4th.
this year meaning 2022. I
And does it, I guess, do you feel like the hiring someone to help you with the engineering still helps you come out ahead? Or
It
does it
does.
help you just get to do the part that you enjoy more?
It's both. I actually did enjoy the engineering side. But well, first of all, someone told me that I could raise my rates. So I didn't know that. I got a vocal coach. She did vocal coaching, business coaching, general narration coaching. And she advised me, she said, you can charge more and hire someone to do this part of your job for you.
Mhm.
So I still come out on top because I was undercharging at
Okay.
the time. I didn't know.
Well, you're
I'm an independent
experienced.
contractor.
You started off new and now
Yes.
you have how many? 30, some more than 30 books under your belt? 80? How many
I
did
have
you say?
80. Yes, I have
80.
80.
Okay. 30 that you engineered first
Yes.
and then okay, got it. And so is that someone that you have to collaborate with closely, or are they at the point now where they can take your books and just turn them back to you? Done.
They just take them from me. I just send them my audio and they send them back to me clean.
Nice.
So it's a very good relationship. I just ask him, I say, do you have space in your schedule for me to send you audio for these dates? And then he sends them back to me.
Let's go back to the beginning when you first started working from home.
Okay.
So you were used to working full time in a classroom with high
Yes.
schoolers, and then all of a sudden you were. I'm assuming it took you several months to figure out where you're going to go next. Did you have to stop teaching and then wait a while, or were you able to transition?
I waited a while because I was still quite sick for a long time, and I still have flare-ups quite regularly now. But I waited a few months before I started looking into hobbies. And this started as a hobby, just something
Okay.
to fill my time to keep me connected with the world of literature. And then I only would I call it a full-time job now. It's not really, it's still part-time, but it's my full-time job. So I went full-time only just a year ago. So I was dabbling before then.
Okay.
So now I keep a full schedule. Um, and by that, I just mean I always have a book I can work on. That's what I
Good.
mean by a full-time schedule.
Mhm. I know when I was teaching online, what one person considered to be fully booked is,
Hmm.
varied wildly from one person
Yes.
to the next. Some
Yes.
people, 6 hours was their full time, like as much as they could fit into their life, and other
Hmm.
people were doing 70.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And that's awesome that you've had a coach. You've been able to make it work and do the part that you like. It sounds like there's a lot of crossover with musicians. You
Hmm.
said voice coaching, so they like help you have stamina, not to have breaks in your voice. What kinds of things were they teaching you there?
Yes, so I don't come from a performance background. So my vocal coach, shout out to Shannon Parks. She's another narrator. She would coach me on warming up, how to take care of my voice and warm up so that I had more stamina. About treatments I can use to keep my voice strong, such as like the vocal mist steamer. I love
Hmm.
my vocal mist steamer.
Hmm.
And just various ways for that and how to warm up my voice. She also coached me on performance because I do not have a performance background. Anyone who's taught students knows that you have to perform to some extent to get them to pay attention to you, but it's not in a traditional format.
Hmm.
So she coached me on that, and that was really helpful. And that's where I'd say my career. So that was the spring of 2021. I'd say that's where my career really took off because I didn't know what I didn't know. And she really taught me how to level up in this career.
And I'm assuming that you find people all the time that as soon as they find out that's what you do, they're like, tell me more.
Yes.
What kinds of things do you, I guess when I was working from home as a medical transcriptionist, it was one of like the early work from home jobs a long time ago. People would come to me and be like, I want to do what you do. And I would have to say, well, it's kind of a dying field.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to look for something else that you can do from home. I have a feeling you must have to tell people like you can't just plug and go. You have to do you recommend that you do the same kinds of training as you do, or do you coach people too as well?
I do not coach. I've thought about it, but I would like to wait a little bit of time before I go into coaching. I do give a lot of tips on social media and things like that right now.
Mhm.
But there's some really great resources that I always direct people to if they want to get into audiobook narration, working from home in narration. The first one is narratorsroadmap.com, which just maps out what the job entails, what equipment you'll need, what training you'll need. Some people do all of this without a coach. Like I said, I went like 2.5 years without a coach. So you can do it, but I didn't have resources like the narrator's roadmap at the time. So that's a wonderful resource for anyone who's interested in getting involved in audiobook narration. There's also there's an audiobook called How to Become an Audiobook Narrator, written and narrated by a narrator. So that's by Andy Garcia Ruse. She just put that one out in December. So she was the same thing. People kept coming to her and asking her, "How can I be a narrator?" And so she finally just wrote a book about it.
I'm assuming that there's some can how can you be a pet owner or a parent of young children and be a narrator?
With complications. So I modify my schedule um, to I only work when my kids are at school or when they're asleep because it is very difficult. It's easier now because of their ages. They're pretty self-sufficient. But I try to keep it that I work business hours while they're in school and I limit the projects I can take in the summertime, because it's just difficult having children screaming in the background when you're trying to record audio.
Mhm.
And as far as pets, I have a cat, and my cat wants to be near me all the time. So she throws her body against the door of my booth.
Oh, no.
And she screams and throws her body against it, just like, "Mom,
Oh.
I want to be with you. I want to be with you." That is a newer complication that I haven't really figured out yet, but she only does it, um, usually if I take a break and go and snuggle her for a little bit, she'll stop. So, I have to give in to the cat, but, someone actually just was talking about this morning about how to do audiobook narration with a dog, and people said, "Just let them in the booth with you and hope they don't make noise."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you never know, the audiobooks that you're listening to, there could have been a cat sitting there or a child popping in asking questions about snacks, but we just edit that all out.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds a lot like podcasting in some
Yes,
ways.
a lot like podcasting.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so going back to you were in a classroom, you were with students all the day long, and then you were all of a sudden home and primarily working alone. What are some of the things that you have overcome during that time, that transition?
So I am a very extroverted person. I love having colleagues. I know that one of the things that people love about working from home is that they get to remain introverted. But even if you are an introvert, there is something about having colleagues, about having a community around you. And I didn't really feel like I had that. That was probably the hardest transition, because when I'm narrating books, I'm just in this little box by myself, talking to myself, and there's zero accountability. I need someone to smack me and tell me to get with it and go do work. So that was probably the hardest thing I had in transition, other than, giving up my students, which was very difficult.
Yeah.
But accountability. So you and I actually met on FocusMate.
Right. Yes. I actually had to look it up and remember how did we meet, but yes, of course. Of course we
Yes.
did.
So FocusMate, I just started on it a few weeks ago, and that's really helped me build community. So I pull up FocusMate I'll pull up a session, and it's a 50 or 75-minute session. We turn the mics off. So I have someone else there with me in the booth, kind of. And that really helps hold me accountable. It gives me a time to arrive to work. It also prevents me from leaving work early. So if
Mhm.
I'm scheduled for a 75-minute session, that's how long I'm working. And I usually do back to back a few of those sessions.
Mhm.
And that's really been because accountability is the absolute hardest thing about this job, because there is absolutely no one telling you what you have to get done on any given day. So I try to keep to I've learned over the past year with my back-to-back schedule, I've learned that I can record anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day. That is the absolute 4 hours is where I tap out.
Mhm.
So learning that is really good to know. Um, and I usually try to keep it at a comfortable 2 hours. So, and that's 2 hours of recording is one final hour recorded, if that makes any sense.
Oh, say that one more time. Like, what do you mean?
So it takes me 2 hours of being in the booth and speaking in order to get 1 hour of audio,
Because of having to rephrase
because of
things
having to
or
stop and start so much.
okay.
Yep. So that's actually a pretty fast rate.
Mhm.
And when it comes out of it, the audio is completely clean. It's raw audio that is, from start to finish. My engineer gets no errors. It's other than, what he finds later. But it should be from start to finish, everything is clean.
And is that you taking out your repeats?
Yes.
Your punch and roll stuff?
Yep, that's me taking everything out.
Okay. I figured that he would just have to deal with all that.
No, no. There are engineers who do, and I'm sure he would if I asked him to, but he'd probably charge me extra. So that's a pretty common standard in this industry, is to have what they call clean audio, where you don't have any of your mistakes included.
Okay. And then if he finds one, it's like digging a treasure out of a
Yes,
mine kind
yes
of
it
thing.
is.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yep. So he listens to the audio while also looking at the script, making sure it's word for word.
How about pronunciation? Like I grew up reading a lot of books and you probably did too. But I will say that I didn't read out loud much. And as an adult, I've learned to pronounce some words incorrectly in my head.
Yes.
So when I read out loud, I'm like, I literally don't know how to say this word.
So, I have a quite an extensive prep process. So when I say it takes 6 hours to complete 1 hour of audio, that includes my prep process. So when I'm first reading a book, I go through and I pull out any words that I might have trouble pronouncing, be it a name, a location, something in another language, or just a word that I, don't know how to say aloud. And I put that in a sheet, and it either goes to the author or the publisher, whoever I'm working with, and then they send me back the pronunciations. So I can
Okay.
put that on there. So they help me with that prep part of my process.
So you don't have to
And
go and individually research every single word.
I do not need to. I can if I want to. So if it's something where it's just a word that I don't know how to pronounce, I can research that.
Mhm.
But if it's like a character name, I'll usually send that back to the author or the publisher and ask them, hey, how do you say this?
How did you want me to say it? Yeah.
Yes, how should I say this? Because I had one time that I said a character's name wrong 175 times in a book, and I had to go back and replace it 175 sentences.
Oh, really? So you didn't have to record the whole book again,
No,
just those sentences.
just 175 sentences.
And with your punch and roll method, am I saying that right?
Yes.
You get the cadence and the tone and the volume, I guess.
Yes.
So it all
So you
matches in
just
the end.
record it along with it. Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, well, there's a lot of things I didn't know about that. You mentioned that you also have dabbled in romance books with a pseudonym. You want to talk
Yes,
about that a little bit?
I can talk about that, yes, but I try to keep her completely separate.
Okay.
So I do under my own name because I taught high school. I do books that are young adult or kind of rated PG-13.
Got it.
But anything that has anything spicier,
Mm-hmm.
I read under a different name.
Twice.
And actually, she's booked up very heavily this year. I'm under my name. I don't have as many books as she's apparently gaining popularity.
I love it. Oh,
Yeah.
fun. But you keep it separate for that reason, just because of and I'm assuming that some of your old students are finding you like, hey,
Oh my
Miss.
goodness. Yes. And so one of the things I actually like to do is I record if I'm not on Focus Mate. I also like accountability recording on TikTok Live. I get permission from the author and I just go on and I record the whole book on TikTok Live. Because you can't replay it, people aren't on it the whole time. They just pop in and watch me in my booth recording. And students will hop on TikTok and be like, is that Mrs. Yetter? And they follow me. So, it is important. Plus I have my master's in education. So, maybe I'll want to use that someday.
That's so cool. Yeah, absolutely. I have a master's in education as well, but mine is adult education.
Okay. Mine is secondary.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm using it and sometimes I'm not.
Yep.
Right.
So I think for the most part, because the nature of my chronic illness, my neurologist actually advised me to leave the classroom because he said, if you want to keep being sick, then you stay in this career. But working from home is just a more viable option for me. And keeping my own hours with chronic illness is really, really essential because I talk about accountability, sometimes I can't make it to work that day
Mhm.
because I get sick.
Mhm. So the nature of your work has some flexibility. You're not
Yes.
on like super strict deadlines, like you have to have this done by tomorrow.
No. So I usually schedule out, I usually give myself at least 2 months. I schedule out a book. It doesn't take me 2 months, but I've learned that having that wiggle room in there. Now I'm working in between that, but I've gotten to a point where I can give myself enough time that if I am ill, I have space in my schedule
Mhm.
to take that time and be sick. And I consider that part of my, work. My job is to stay home and take care of myself.
Right.
And then I do this as an extra thing.
Were there any other work from home jobs that you considered or even dabbled in before you settled into this one?
So I briefly dabbled in baking macaroons, macarons. So I was very, very bored. Was still kind of sick, but I had time, and I was watching a lot of baking shows. And on the baking shows, they said how hard it is to bake French macarons, and how time consuming it was. And I was like, well, I've got time. So I learned how to bake French macarons and was starting a little business. I actually got my Serve Safe license. I took the test and I'm able to sell from home if people want to. So I was catering macarons for a little while.
That's very random compared to what you ended up in, but cool. You can fall back on that if you ever need to.
Yep, it's
Maybe
just
like
something I
around
do
the
in my free time now.
like would Valentine's Day be a good time to like ramp that up a little?
Yes, yeah. People just ask me like for parties and whatnot, and I made some for Christmas. Now it's just a fun thing I do.
Did you end up finding that that was more physically taxing though?
It was more physically taxing, and the deadlines were more urgent,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
people, if you need macarons, if you need pastries for a birthday party,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be done. They have to be perfect. There's no room for me to be sick.
Right.
So I did find that it was actually more taxing than doing this, because there was a time where I was doing both. And doing audiobook narration it was so much more conducive to my schedule.
Mm-hmm. How old are your kiddos now?
7 and 8.
Oh, wow. I have a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So I know about that.
Mhm.
They're
Yes.
losing teeth like crazy.
Yes.
My 12-year-old just lost her very last tooth. Literally at the
Oh.
dentist. The dentist was flossing her tooth and like it came out.
Oh.
Oh,
The
that's a fun.
monumental moment.
That is a fun age where they're still, I mean, they still need you, but
Mhm.
they can still occupy themselves for longer than they could when they were 2 and 3 and 4.
Yes. So my job has gotten easier over the past 4 years,
Mhm.
because when I first started doing this, I had a 3 and a 4-year-old. So
That's a different animal.
that was completely different. There was no recording when they were home. But like right now, my daughter's actually home with me. She wasn't feeling well today.
Mhm.
So, but she knows mommy's working.
Yep.
It's a short period of time, but if she needs me, she can run in and
Yep.
and I'll help her out, of course.
Yeah, and we'd edit it out if it
And we
happened
would
because we
edit it out.
can.
Yes.
That's what I love about this is that there is that little bit of wiggle room, like, for people
Mhm.
that do have kids.
Yes.
Because there's some jobs that will not allow you to
Yeah.
have children in the home, unless they had another caregiver. And
Yes.
that's one thing that I do encounter a lot of people, like if they want to work for a corporation, a company, they have signed an agreement oftentimes. Some people forget that they did that, I think.
Yes.
um, that no, you can't be the sole caregiver for your children, especially young toddlers,
Mm.
while working your job. But there are certain jobs like yours that
Yeah.
maybe you can work around because you can pause and re-record.
Yes, yes, you can. And I can take an hour or a 5-day break and then go back to the book.
Hmm.
And it's like I never left. So that is very, very convenient, the stop and start of it. I was very sick from October to December, so I had to take 2 whole months off
Hmm.
this past fall. So but I was just able to shuffle things around in my schedule and came back to it and came back strong.
So you're generally working while the kids are at school or
Yes.
sleeping.
Yes.
I have done a lot of work while my kids were sleeping, but it required me to like literally work all night or
Mhm.
wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
So do your kids sleep in or do you have to like get it all done by 5 a.m. or something crazy?
I cannot do it in the morning, at all. They don't really sleep in. So I would usually they're pretty good at going to bed. Usually they're asleep by 9:30. So I would just work into the night. And like I said, I usually don't do any more than 2 to 4 hours in a single session. So, I've stayed up till 1 a.m. recording, 2 a.m. recording, but I've never had
Hmm.
to go past that. And I am fortunate that, like on weekends, if I have to work, my husband can just take them to the park
Hmm.
for 2 hours.
Hmm. Yes,
So
we've had
I
that
that
arrangement
is
before.
very convenient as well.
And is he also working out of the home or is he doing something else?
No, he's not. He works a 7 to 3:30 job.
Okay. So are you getting the kids to school then?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And I know that that can be its own thing. Do they do bus or do you have to bring them in?
So this year I actually they're on the bus. In previous years I would drive them, but I found that it actually buys me an extra hour to my day if they go on the bus, 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes later, and I'm not sitting in the car ride line, which is a stressful beast,
Yep.
in the morning and in the afternoon. So I found that it's just easier, and fortunately for them, they're the first or they're the last stop in the morning and the first stop in the afternoon, so they're only
Okay.
on there for 15 minutes.
Hmm. Yeah, I
But
have heard of teachers. Actually, I just was talking to a teacher friend the other day, and teachers have to be to school early.
yes.
And the kids that have parents as teachers are, either going to have to be in before care, and sometimes that can be incredibly expensive. And so one of my friends, she said, "Yeah, my friend drives her kid to the basically the furthest away stop from her
Mhm.
school to drop her off
Oh.
early."
Oh,
so that the
I've never heard
kid is riding the bus for an hour on purpose
Oh,
because
no.
that's how she can get her kid to school and get to school herself on time.
Well, that's been one of the biggest blessings about this, and I always try to look at, like, all of the blessings that have come with being able to work from home,
Mhm.
even though I lost the job that I was passionate about, um, there's so many advantages to being able to do what I do, and one of them being that I am around for my kids more. I mean, at max, I'm working 3 to 4 hours a day.
Mhm.
I am able to get them on the bus and off the bus. I have the availability to take off when I want to take off.
Yep.
So I can schedule a week off if I want to schedule a week
Mhm.
off.
And
Uh,
volunteer or do a field trip or something like that sometimes.
yes, yes. So that's been a really amazing thing about this. Also, I left teaching before the pandemic.
Oh.
So I never had to go through what a lot of teachers went through. Teaching is
Mhm.
still this pure and wholesome, my kids sat around on floor pillows and we'd talk about books. That's what it was. So it's still that in my mind. It wasn't, I didn't have to go through what a lot of teachers went through in the past few years.
So I was reading in one of my working mom groups
Mhm.
this morning, and this lady said, or maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember. I was, I think, waiting for the dentist, and I was reading, and she said, reading books, even kid books, children's
Mhm.
literature is still literature.
Yes.
And, don't be ashamed if you like Sandra Boynton and, like some of the Jeannie B. Jones or whoever, you are
Mhm.
into. And I appreciate that because I feel like as a mom, so much of my reading time, and I told this to my husband that I'm like, everyone's talking about how they're going to read 50 books this year or 100 books or 150, like I would be happy to read 12, but I know realistically I might read two.
Yes.
I'm not currently in a book club right now. And I'm looking around even in my office and I'm surrounded by children's literature. I actually thought about going through for a doctorate in children's literature because I love it so much.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's fun that you get to read like youth, junior, books. Do you enjoy that? Is that like 50-50, you would say, or?
So I don't do like elementary age. I would love to. I would absolutely love to, but I rarely get those books. But I usually do actually the age range that where I used to teach.
Mhm.
So it's adolescents, middle grade
Yep.
or young adult books, and I absolutely love that because it gives me that connection to that age group that I'm
Mhm.
no longer getting. So I'm still sharing books with, and adults read them as well.
Right. Mhm.
But still I love that age group and I'm still connecting with it and telling their stories to them. And I love that so much. Also, I have a young sounding voice. So
Oh, well, I think that even like when I choose the books I want to read myself, I still end up navigating towards like say The Hunger Games or The Giver and
yes,
like like just those they're classics, but then my kid gets to read it in school and I can relate with them.
yes,
And I
yes.
enjoy that.
I love that too. My kids are always asking me to record more books that they can listen to. Um,
Mhm.
and they have been able to listen to a few of them. It's cute that they like to listen to my books. They think I'm famous.
I think you probably are. And then
Maybe in some circles. But I
someone
just did a
was
book. You mentioned Hunger Games and The Giver. I just did a book called The Diseased Ones, which is very much in line with Hunger Games or The Giver. It's this amazing young adult dystopian book that
Mhm.
I really connected with. I absolutely loved recording it. It was great working with the author.
And it's brand new.
It's brand new. Yes, the book is out, but the audiobook comes out in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's another thing that someone was talking about in that same thread, like it's okay if you like children's literature or young
Of
adult
course.
literature. And then audiobooks are still books.
Audiobooks are still books, and that's something that I didn't even, touch on from when I was sick. When I was very sick, I couldn't pick up a book and read it,
Mhm.
so I had always really looked down on audiobooks.
Mhm.
I'm an English teacher, literature is only the words on the page, and I learned about the accessibility of audiobooks when I needed them,
Yeah.
because I didn't have another way to read books, and that was the way that I connected with the world was
Mhm.
through literature, and that was a big learning experience for me that, oh, wait, audiobooks are books for one, and they're accessible to so many more people. And then I learned that even when I'm not ill, um, when I'm just doing mom duties or doing, chores around the house or something like that, I can still listen to books. And so the number of books that I was able to read each year increased because the accessibility.
Right. I know when I was running a book club, I would probably absorb about half of them.
Mhm.
I prefer paper,
Okay.
a real paper book. I don't really like electronic readers.
Mhm.
But I would say the audiobooks I feel like have stuck with me even better in
Yeah.
some ways. I listened to Just Mercy as an audiobook.
Okay.
Do you know that book?
I do not.
They made a movie out of it.
Okay.
It's like social justice things.
Cool. Very cool.
Really interesting. But I even remember where I was driving as I was listening to it at times, like how your brain kind of processes. Like sometimes if I listen to an audiobook while I'm walking, I can always remember where I walked when I listened to it. But yeah, I feel like sometimes it's like my body maybe processed it a little bit different or absorbed it in a different way than I would have on paper, but I like that.
Yes, yeah, and oral storytelling has been around way longer than written word. Spoken word has been around way longer.
Right. And then sometimes you can pick, like if we have a copy of the book and you can be reading it and then pick
Yes.
up with the audiobook another time, and like it can be a little bit of like hodgepodge, but it's cool.
That's one of my favorite features. Some books on Kindle have that feature where you can bounce between and it'll pick up the page number
Mhm.
on Kindle. It'll pick up on the Kindle or in the audiobook of where you stopped. And that's fantastic. So I'll be reading it, sitting on my couch on my e-reader, and then I'll hop in the car and I'll continue the story. And I love that so much.
So other than FocusMate
Mhm.
and the course that you went through, do you have anything else that's helped you through these last 4 years as you've transitioned to working from home?
Um, so the community of audiobook narrators is so we're actors, we're voice actors.
Mhm.
But it's not really a competitive environment. It's a very warm and welcoming environment. And I didn't really learn about the community of audiobook narrators um because until, a year and a half ago. Before that I was very isolated, and that was really hard for me because to me community is people who are in front of you that you see every day. And I had to learn a little bit more about what it means to build a community outside of your physical space. And so connecting with other people who do the same thing that I do, I've grown exponentially, and my work has grown exponentially just learning from them because I just absorb what other people have to give. I want your knowledge. I'll give you mine, you give me yours. And so really finding an online community and, we weren't able to meet up for the longest time. But now we're getting to the point where we can meet in person. So really accessing people who do what I do, who feel the same imposter syndrome that I feel, the same isolation, the same loneliness. Maybe they're mourning the loss of their career as well, their previous career.
Mm.
Maybe they're in this career path for the same reason that I am, because chronic illness kind of pushed them to work from home, and this has been their saving grace. So really finding community of people who do what I do has helped me understand this career much better, helped me manage my business because this is a business, helped me manage my business better, and just grow.
Are there associations that you can join or competitions or any of that sort of thing
Yes.
in that world?
So I am a member of the Audio Publishers Association, the APA, and the Professional Audiobook Narrators Association, also known as PANA. I will be joining SAG-AFTRA soon.
What is
I'm
that?
not a SAG-AFTRA, the union of actors union.
Okay.
So I've thought about joining them. I will be joining soon. And then those organizations, they set up socials and they have competitions and they have events that you can go to. So I'm going to an event called APAC in March. It's in New York City, and it's the Audio Publishers Association convention. There's also a big award ceremony, the Audies, that night.
Oh, wow.
So it'll be a fun time. I'm gonna wear a gown.
Are there agents and things like that too?
There are. I do not have one. But there are agents that you can hire. A lot of people have personal assistants as well. I just hired a personal assistant, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
So it is managing your business very much the same as any other actor would.
Well, any final thoughts before we head out?
I just for anyone who's interested in audiobook narration, I highly recommend it as a career path. It's been such a saving grace for me. It's a beautiful way to connect with the world. If you are in a similar life position like I am, where you need to make your own hours, it is a great job to do from home. Um, but when you get started, just make sure you do your research because, as I've mentioned several times throughout this interview, there is a lot that goes into it. And but it's worth it.
And any advice for someone that's thinking about working from home for the first time in general?
For someone who's thinking about working from home for the first time, I'd say make sure you treat it like work. Um, Treat it like a job. Otherwise, it won't feel like a job. And for me, that causes trouble. So I like to get dressed for work. I like to set work hours, even though it's not necessary, and I sometimes have to change them. I think that doing that is really essential to feeling yourself getting into that headspace. I think it's important to have a routine and to get yourself into that headspace because it is hard to transition, but it's definitely worth it.
Anything else?
No, I think that about covers it. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Well, thank you so much. This has been April Malone with Jillian Yetter and Yes, I Work From Home. And if you want to interview, reach me at yesiworkfromhome.com/podcast/guest. And you can fill out the guest interest form and let me know when you're ready to interview. All right. Thank you so much, Jillian.
Thank you.